Welcome again to Flame of Truth. We just want to open up a new series now for a few weeks talking about mountaintop living. I don't know if you keep track of the Darwin Awards, the awards they give out every year. Whenever they can find somebody who they say has enriched the gene pool of the world and the universe by dying in the most creative way possible. So let me just read some of these for you. And this year, number one in Detroit, 41-year-old man lost his keys in a sewer, stuck his hand through the 18-inch gate and got stuck, and ended up drowning. His head was down in there, drowned in 2 feet of water in the sewer, looking for the keys. Number two, San Francisco, a stockbroker, 49 years old, jogging. He got so totally zoned out while he was running, ended up jogging, went right over a 100-foot cliff. Number three, North Carolina, a guy dug an 8-foot hole in the beach at the sand, and he sit down there in a beach chair to get out of the wind. And the sand fell in on him, buried himself alive. How can this happen? Number four is New Jersey. Couple was driving down, 2 in the morning, bored, decided to just throw a stick of dynamite out the window and see what happened. Forgot to roll down the window. You can guess what happened. And number five, up in Washington State, a group of guys got drunk, 4:30 in the morning, decided to try bungee jumping off the bridge. Forgot to bring the bungee cord. Decided to use some electrical cable. A guy tied it to his foot and jumped off. After 40 feet, the cable ripped his whole foot off. Somehow the guy lived, and some fishermen fished him out of the water. And the guy said, "All I can say is that God was watching out for me that night." Does God watch out for people who jump off bridges with an electric cable? Oh my, they never found his foot. The craziness. And our first thought when we hear people who do things that foolish is to say, how can people be so stupid as to wreck their lives that way? But then I wondered, even our best, the smartest things you might ever do might seem like Darwin Award acts in the eyes of God. When he looks down and says, look what we do, our best acts probably look like bungee jumping with an electric cable. Why do people do these things, God would say, when I'm offering you such a better life? Mountaintop living, that's our series now. What does it mean to live a mountaintop life? Well, we'll start with one of the great passages in Matthew 17. It is the passage about Jesus on the top of the Mount of Transfiguration. And we'll just try to pull out some lessons from this passage. You think about that Jesus is about to die. He does not remember where he has been. He has given up all his aspects of deity when he comes down here. He doesn't remember being in heaven and angels and mansions and being with God forever. That is gone. He's a baby. The only things he knows are what his mother has told him and what he's read in the Bible and what he gets from the Holy Spirit. And he cannot see through the cross. And now as it gets close to the end and the cross is about to come, we're told that the cross weighed heavy on him. He's going to die, be apart from his Father. And so just a few days before Jesus is going to die on the cross, God gives him this moment at the top of a mountain to help him remember and to symbolize what is going to be. What is the dream? The dream was back at the very beginning when God created Adam and Eve and human beings, that he was going to come down and spend time with them and hang out with them, and they would be a community of love forever, hanging out together. The dream is shattered. They sin, they eat of the tree, and that dream of being together is gone. The whole story of the Bible is trying to get back to that dream, back to that sense of community together, and the ups and downs of history. And Jesus comes down to die for that dream. But just before he dies, God knows that he needs to remind Jesus. The Mount of Transfiguration is for Jesus, first of all, not for us or for the disciples, for Jesus. To know what is going to happen someday, Jesus and Moses and Elijah, a small group together and his disciples, that they're going to hang out forever. That was why he was going to die, climb another hill and die on a cross for this dream. Hebrews says, for the joy that was set before him, he endured the shame of the cross. And Jesus himself had to get a reminder of the dream. You can go through crosses. if you can just have a mountaintop moment to remember who you are and what you are for and what you're going for, you can endure the crosses if you know where you're going. I've been reading a book called The Corporate Athlete about how to live at the top of your game. And so I've been in Hawaii. I've been reading that book. And I'd been reading about diet and about exercise and how to live and how to manage your life. I haven't lived up to it very well, I'll have to admit. But what's the reason to get down on the track and to jog or to say no to a certain extra dessert or whatever you want to do? Is because I have to have a dream. I'm going to walk into a room, and when everyone else is exhausted, I'm going to be on top of my game. That I could, like I did last week, fly around the world, 50 hours of flying, 25 each way to Salusi University in Zimbabwe. And you can get off the plane and you can walk into a room with all the church leaders and negotiate issues that have to be resolved and know that you're going to be the most awake and the most alive and the most energetic because the way you've been living. It's the dream that helps you make the sacrifices and the crosses to go through to that. My young boys, we were in Hawaii, and they loved Hawaii. We came back, and all of a sudden the band teacher announced that for $600 they could go to Hawaii on the band tour. All of a sudden, boys who hate washing cars or doing yard or anything began to go to their neighbors, all wanting to work and to wash their cars and to mow their yard because they had a dream. They wanted to go to Hawaii. You can go through crosses if you have a clear picture of the dream of who you are and what you want to be. And so you have to know, and Jesus goes to the top of the mountain and he hears the Father say, "This is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased." And those words were ringing in his ears as he went through the cross and the nails and the crown of thorns and the people spitting on him and the disciples running away and having to go through the garden and be away from the Father, was because they had a dream of who he is for the Father. And the Father said, "You're doing exactly what I want you to do. This is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased." We have to be careful. We lose the big picture of how the cross fits into the big picture and what's the point. I've been reading a book by Gordon MacDonald talking about the resilient life. And the first thing about living a resilient life is to have the big picture, the dream, who you are. If money was not an object, if there were no obstacles, what would you like to be doing in your life? What is who you are and what you were put on this earth to do? And that is what has to be the guiding star to everything you do. What is the dream? Go for it. We can all go through some crosses as long as we have the big picture clear. What is the end in mind? And the Mount of Transfiguration was that for Jesus. Maybe some of you don't have a clear picture yet, who you are and what you were made to do. I've been reading Max Lucado, The Cure for the Common Life. Living in your sweet spot. Every sport, every bat has a spot on the bat, or a tennis racket has a sweet spot. A golf club, I play golf. There's a spot on the club. You hit it too far one way or the other, it doesn't feel right. It doesn't happen easy. But when you're in your sweet spot, the ball jumps off the club. It jumps off the bat. And life is easier. And every one of you, if you find your mission, your picture of who you were made to be in this world, you will have your sweet spot. Life is easier when you're in your area of giftedness. That's the big picture, what you are to do. And it makes living through the crosses much easier when you know what you're going to be and what you're going to do. MacDonald makes another great point. He's, close to 70 now, I think. Great pastor, president of World Vision. But he said, too many people get to this point in life, 50s like me, 60s, and you begin to look around and you realize the dream hasn't quite come true in your life. Marriage isn't quite what you thought it was going to be when you stood in front of a preacher in your suit and a white dress. And maybe your job, you haven't gone as far in your job as you thought you would be. You haven't made as much money. Your kids are not what you thought they might be. Or your family, your friends. You look around your friends and the people who went through school your time, and you realize some of them have gone farther than you have. And you realize it's not going to happen. You're going to be at this place, and you have disappointment. Some people quit, and they just sort of check out, and they just go down because life is over. And Gordon MacDonald says, with healthcare now, we all have another 20 or 25 years to live. You can finish at 65. You may have another 20, 25 years to 90 or 95 of productive, active life where you can give of your knowledge to the world and accomplish some things. And you could almost say that you could have your best years in the second half of your life. You can accomplish the most if you have a clear picture of a dream, of where you are going and what you want to do. You can make the most difference in the second half of your life. So finish well. Go after it. And when you have that picture of the dream, you can live with the crosses along the way. Well, number 2 is the hope. The Mount of Transfiguration was a way of giving Jesus hope. Not just reminding him of the dream, but to give him hope. That at the end of the cross, there was going to be a resurrection. And it was going to be with Jesus. Here's Moses, who's been resurrected. And Christ now is going to be resurrected. And so it gives you hope. Maybe some of you need to have some hope. You think about what it was like for Moses. Moses is found in the bulrushes, and his mother tells him, you were made to do something great for God. He ends up in the palace. He's going to be Pharaoh someday. He's got all the hope in the world when he kills a man, and all of a sudden he's taken out to the desert and he's herding sheep for 40 years. The dream is gone, and he has to be willing to accommodate his dream down to reality. He's just a shepherd. When God calls him, says, you're going to follow me, and you're going to be a leader of the Exodus and set my people free, take them all to the promised land. And he goes and he has the plagues, and they go to walking across the desert. And he's going to take them to the promised land. The dream is back. When all of a sudden he gets mad and he hits the rock. How come I have to be the one to get water for you? And he ends up in trouble, and God has to say, you're not going to go into the promised land. Hope is gone. But just before he dies, God takes him up into the top of the mountain, and he points him over to the promised land. And that promised land is a symbol of the ultimate promised land that he was going to have. That Moses decided he would rather be with his people of God and someday be in a city that was made by God. He would rather be a stranger and an alien in this world and suffer for that someday the reward would come. And God is reminding him that the ultimate dream, he was going to be disappointed. He was going to have to die without going into the promised land. But someday he was going to have hope again. And so God gives him hope. Never quit, never give up. There's always hope. That's the purpose of a mountaintop once in a while, to say, okay, there's still hope. Everybody needs hope. We were in Hawaii. We were living simple. We all live a simple life. We went by and saw Charles Lindbergh's grave and kind of the place on Maui where he had spent the last few years of his life. A friend of his had gone to Maui, and he wrote a note back and he said, I have found heaven. It's on Maui. And so you're at a place like Maui, and you see the beaches, and you get to see the sunsets, and you go swimming, and you get an idea of what heaven is going to be someday, and you say, okay, there's hope. I want that. Someday, there's hope. There's something better than what there's already there. So once in a while, you have to have a mountaintop moment like we had to be in Hawaii to just remind you, okay. I was in the airport in Victoria Falls just last week. And I've been to Victoria Falls once, the first time I went to Africa. I didn't have time this particular time to slip away from the airport and come back, but I visualized it. There's pictures everywhere. Victoria Falls. And I got to have a wonderful night in the Victoria Falls Hotel. Then they had a breakfast for us out on the lawn. You could not see the falls, but you could hear it, and you could see the spray bouncing up. Incredible. And maybe the best breakfast I have ever had. White tablecloth, outdoors in the sun, and men in white suits coming to serve you every omelet, every pancake, every cereal, orange juice, mango juice, whatever you want. Spectacular. And I said to myself, this is what heaven is like. And every once in a while, you need a mountaintop moment like that to just remind you of what's coming, that this world is not the end. And this Mount of Transfiguration is a wonderful message that what happened to Jesus, to be taken to the top of this mountain and to be alive with Moses and Elijah, is what will happen to all of us someday. We will all be on the Mount of Transfiguration. And I just want to say something about those of you that have anything connection to a Christian school. This Mount of Transfiguration, this sense of giving hope, and that the world can change, and that people can change, and that there's hope, is what schools are all about. I just came back from Zimbabwe. This is why I do what I do in my little trips and my sideline moments. I have my job, pastor of the La Sierra University Church, but in my little extra time when I'm in the car or late at night or Sundays, I'm emailing and trying to help raise money for schools around the world, besides our own school. This is why we do what we do. If you could just wave a magic wand and change the world and give people hope. I have read some of the Harry Potter books just so I could answer the questions about them to my church members. And they had to have classes in transfiguration of changing people into animals or animals into people and all kinds of things. And most of us know you can't do that. But we do believe that schools have this kind of power to just wave a magic wand, not in a moment, but over time. And you can take little children into a school, and 8 years later, 12 years later, 16 years later, they come out adults who know God, who are bright and powerful and meaningful. It's incredible. I had an email last night when someone said 40 years ago, they were at their church that I'm at now, and one of our families 40 years ago was sent over to college in Seleucia University in Africa, where I was just there. And when they got there, they found one student that just couldn't make it without some help. And so wrote a note back and said, could somehow 10 of you ladies get together as a group and each one once a month bring $1. $1 is not much now. It wasn't much 40 years ago. Each lady would bring $1, $10. They would send the $10 over. That student finished school. They forgot all about it. Many, many years later, the one who wrote me the letter was serving as missionaries in France and happened to meet somebody from Africa. They were now translating, I think, for the UN. And how are you? How are you? Where'd you go to school? Seleucia University. And he said, I graduated because 10 ladies sent $1 a month over so I could go to school. And she said, I was one of those ladies. That's why we do what we do. Why my church, why we pour money into school, why we send money for tuition aid. Every day I'm having to raise money to help someone go to school because schools are that most powerful agency in the world to give people hope, to transfigure people, and to put people on top of a mountain someday with Jesus. That's what we believe. And that's why we give our lives into school, is to make a difference. Make a difference for kids. Transfigure them and give them hope. Well, let's go a little more theology before we're done today. There's a lot of gospel in this passage. Jesus is on top of the mountain above Moses and Elijah. Doesn't that say clearly Jesus is the way? Jesus is the place. We respect every world religion. I've preached about that on this show before. I grew up in Thailand with Buddhism. I've been to India with Islam. I've been to the Muslim Islam temples. I've been to the one here in our town. And I'm honored to kneel down with everybody and bow my head down to the ground and worship God. Yes, all good. We can learn from all world religions. But we believe Jesus is the top of the mountain. Jesus is the ultimate. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. So we think of the centrality and the uniqueness of Jesus Christ. What does this say about inspiration? We would say Jesus is the one who was the most inspired. Moses was also inspired. Moses was a prophet of God, wrote 5 books of the Bible at least. Inspired, yes. But Jesus is greater than Moses. So it is possible for 2 things to be inspired, to be truth. But Jesus is the greatest revelation of all. He is the clearest inspiration of God. And so we understand that you read all the Bible, it is all true. All Scripture is inspired. But there is an ultimacy in Christ. And we have to take all the other parts of the Bible and understand them only through Christ. If you've had trouble with some of the different parts of the Bible, we're studying Isaiah now in my church. There's some hard parts of Isaiah, but it has to always be understood in light of Christ. Jesus is the ultimate. And what about grace? This story says clearly, grace is always over law. Here's Jesus and here's Moses. Grace and law. Mount Sinai, Mount Golgotha. 2 mountains. 2 mountains that are moments of God, that are pinnacles of religious salvation history. Absolutely important. Mountaintop living. Do not choose between the 2 in terms of we count both of them. We want grace, we need the cross, and we need the 10 Commandments. We have both of them in our lives. But let's be crystal clear, which is supreme, which is how we are saved. It is always grace. We were in Hawaii. We bought T-shirts, my boys and I, that had the 10 Commandments in Hawaiian Pidgin English. So I'm going to have to read that to you just for fun. Number 1, God is number 1. Number 2, don't make the kind of statues. Number 3, watch your mouth. Watch your mouth. No sweat with God's name. Number 4, on Sunday, we keep Saturday. On Sunday, no can't do nothing. Number 5, listen to your mother and your father. Number 6, no kill nobody. Number 7, no go moy moyo with your brother's wahini. Don't commit adultery. No go moy moyo with your brother's wahini. Number 8, no cockroach nothing, no stealing. Number 9, no lie, bruh. And number 10, no be jealous of one another person's stuffs. I can't pronounce it the way they can. Then they added 11. Oh, and one another thing. No talk stink about nobody. Bamba, you get bachi. Don't talk bad about anybody. And so I said in my church when I preached on this to our schools, we want schools with character. We want young people to finish school with a character where they are true blue as far as they eat no needle to the pole. They don't turn to the right or to the left. They have character. They keep the commandments. You don't have to worry about them in the day, night, or darkness or anywhere they are. They will be true blue. Yes, we want character. We want Moses. We want law. We want Mount Sinai. But over that all, we want Jesus and grace. Grace is supreme. Grace is the only answer at the top of the mountain. I was listening to a tape by Bill Hybels, and he and Gordon MacDonald were talking. They talked about the moments of character in lives. He said he was going through a toll booth in Chicago here recently, and somehow when he got to that toll booth, he didn't have any money, no change, 40, 50 cents now I think it is. And so he felt bad, just had to drive on through. The red light went off, but he went on to his meeting. On his way back, he came to a toll booth that had a person there this time. And he said, I want to give double because I went through this morning. I didn't have any money to pay. He said, you can't do that. It'll mess up our count. We can only have 50 cents for every driver. If we have 50 cents extra, it'll mess up the count. No, I have to give this to you. I have to be able to sleep at night. Character is made out of thousands of those kinds of choices to live a godly. Moses, yes, is the top of the mountain. But higher than that is Jesus and grace. Moses is there. You think about this. Moses is there. He killed a man. He hit a rock. He made some mistakes. He did not get to cross over into the promised land. He had to die first. But now he is in Hebrews chapter 11. He's one of the giants of faith. And now here he is on top of the Mount of Transfiguration. And God is making a statement that you are saved by grace alone. Anybody who is going to be at the top of the mountain at the end of the world is going to be there because of grace. Only because of grace and never because of anything else. And so that's why we want our schools to be balanced. Every day our schools have to find a balance between law and grace. You have to find a balance between law and grace. You want to live a godly life, but you are only saved by grace. That is the only basis. There's a wonderful story from Vietnam. I just went as a boy, but had lots of friends from Vietnam when I went to high school in Singapore. There was someone who was killed by the communists. His wife had to watch it happen. The wife was still there, and they were working together, and one of the communist ladies says, I suppose you hate us now. And the nurse said, no, I don't hate you. I came to show you Jesus, who is a God of grace and forgiveness. You don't learn that overnight. It's something you learn over a lifetime of school. Well, we've got to be done here quickly. Moses and Elijah were friends of God. It's one of the great messages of the Bible. Jesus, just before he died, he said, John 15:15, I have called you friends. No longer master and servant. I have called you friends. And he pulls Moses and Elijah. Moses was a friend of God. Yes, God gives commandments, but Moses is a friend of God. The ultimate place God wants us to be is friends of God. It is so incredible when I have had professors that were professors. They were my teachers. I revered them. They were PhD, brilliant geniuses. And then over time, they became my friends. Dr. Fritz Guy lives across the street. Dr. Larry Garrity was a president of our university. They were my professors. And now we're soulmate friends. And that's what Jesus says, no longer master and student. I've called you friends now. That's who we are. And so that's what this passage is. My question for you today is, which group are you in? Are you with a group of disciples that were down at the bottom of the mountain? They're not friends of God in terms of their own heart. They're scared of God, and they had no power to do the miracles. Jesus came down, and they were trying to cast out demons. They could not. Are you with that group down at the bottom of the valley? Or are you in the next group up, which is Peter, James, and John? They're one step closer. They're at least in Jesus' inner circle. And they have faith in God, and they're at the Mount of Transfiguration, but they are not. They're still afraid. They're still scared. They're still bowed down before Christ on top of the Mount of Transfiguration. Or are you part of Moses and Elijah where Jesus says, I have called you friends? Are you down at the bottom? Are you near the top, but still afraid of God to some degree? Or are you with Moses and Elijah, comfortable with God, friends of God? Which group are you in, at the bottom or the top? And then finally, there's a wonderful message here about small groups. Jesus says, where 2 or 3 are gathered together, there will I be in the midst of them. We will have small groups in heaven. When you get to heaven, we're all going to be at the banquet table. I think you will be with your small group. The people who will be in heaven will mostly have been in a group, like the disciples, Peter, James, and John, Moses, and Elijah. And Jesus is saying at the Mount of Transfiguration, the people who are in heaven are part of a group and part of a church, and people who will be with God forever. And so I just invite you today to say, what level are you living life at? Are you living valley living? You believe in God, but you're not very close, and you're not really living a triumphant life. You've forgotten the dream. Are you almost at the top, or at the very top, living a mountaintop life? Go for the top.